Shall we begin? Let's begin now.
Welcome back to Arabic in Lockdown with Yusi, or Arabic in Lockdown with Mr. Hana. We are on our fourth lesson. We're doing amazingly, and honestly, thank you to every single one of you for tuning in, for feeding back, for subscribing to the YouTube channel, for following the Instagram page. It's very much appreciated, and I hope you're all learning as much as I am having fun teaching all of you. So thank you again, and we begin. So good afternoon, good morning, or good evening to all of you, of course, depending on what part of the world you're tuning in from. Today, in our fourth lesson or fourth episode, we're going to be looking at 4 letters instead of 3. And why I've done that today is because 2 of the letters are very similar to each other, and the other 2 are also very similar to each other, so we can get them done a lot faster. So the 2 letters we're looking at today are the letters that you can see right here on the small whiteboard, are letters Ra and Zain, sorry. This letter over here is Ra, and this letter over here is Zain, but I'll get to that in a second more in depth so that we can actually understand what letters we're looking at. They're both like a sort of slanting down J in a sense. One has a dot and one doesn't. But if we look down here a second, if you listen to how I pronounce Ra, there's a bit of a stress at the end of it. You don't have to stress it as much as I've just done. I've only done that to allow you to hear it properly. But it's pronounced Ra. And that stress at the end of it is represented by this little apostrophe. So I've put the apostrophe there so that you can actually remember that that's how it sounds. So Ra, again, the same as all the other letters we've looked at before. Sounds might differ depending on where the letter is in a word, but when we look at just the alphabet or just the letters, these are the correct pronunciations for each and every letter, with of course the correct intonations. But we'll look at that in a second. We'll look at that in a second. So the letter Ra is this one over here, and it has an R sound, okay, in English. And then the other letter is the letter Zain, and the letter Zain is the same as the letter Ra, but it has a dot on top. So if you can remember with Jim, Ha, and Kha, there's a difference in the dots. Jim has one underneath, Kha has one on top, and then Ha doesn't have any. So again, we're looking at a similar trend over here. So we're looking at Ra and Zain to start off with, and then we look at 2 other letters in the alphabet in a second. So with a Fetha, and I've put them next to each other so that we can actually compare them this time. With a Fetha on top, the letter Ra would sound, of course, many of you can actually jump to this conclusion already and tell me if you've been following lesson 1, 2, and 3. With a Fetha, it would be Ra, and for Zain, with a Fetha, would be Za. With a Kasra, for Ra, it would be Ri, and for Zain, with a Kasra, it would be Zi. With a Dhamma, for Ra, it would be Ro, and Dhamma on the letter Zain, it would be Zo. Okay, so Ra, Za, Ri, Zi, Ro, Zo. Okay, let's do it one more time together. Ra, Za, Ri, Zi, and Ro, Zo. Okay, one more time, and we look at Ra first and then look at Zain. Ra, Ri, Ro, Za, Zi, Zo. Another thing that we need to remember, if you can backtrack a little bit to our previous lesson, you'll remember that I did say about Del and Del. Sorry for the writing, it's moving about. Del and Del, we can only join them from this side. We can only join them from the back. We can't join them from the front. Okay, so the same applies. Exactly the same applies. So Del that we looked at, and then Del. Okay, the same applies to Ra and Za and Zain. Ra and Zain. Okay, the same applies to them. Exactly the same. We can only join Ra and Zain from this side over here. So we can join them from this side, and for Zain it can be joined from this side, but they can't be joined from the bottom of the tail over here. Okay, when we're actually using them in words, sorry. Okay, so if we're using them in words, we cannot join them from this side, we can only join them from that side. The same as the example I gave a second ago of del and dhel that we looked at in the previous lesson. Okay, so we've looked at ra and zain, and we've looked at the fatha, the kasra, and the dhamma, how they would sound on these two letters. Okay, please do remember, I know it can become confusing, but we're looking at two letters at the same time. Okay, so ra is one letter and zain is another letter. We're just doing them both at the same time because they're very similar and it makes it easier to do. Okay, and now we move on to our next two letters. We look at the fatha, the kasra, and the dhamma for those. Okay, so the next two letters we're going to look at in today's lesson are the letters sin and sheen. Okay, so they're not the most difficult letters to write down, and of course they can change when we're actually writing words, but they're quite simple in the sense that it's three, like a W. Okay, and remember we're writing right to left, so we start over here and we do a backwards W from right to left, and then we give it a bit of a tail. So this letter over here is sin and this letter is sheen. Before we start looking at the intonations and how they sound with each different intonation, a little key down here. So sin, or this one over here that doesn't have any dots on top, okay, it has an S sound. Okay, so sin has that S sound, and then sheen, the one with the three dots on top, is the SH sound. So sh, the SH sound. Okay, so they are very similar to each other, the same as ra and zain, exactly the same shape. The only thing that differs is the number of dots, or in this case, no dots for sin and no dots for ra. Okay, so let's start at the fatha. For the fatha, sin would sound like this, sa, and sheen would be sha. For the kasra, it would be si and shi. And with the dhamma, it's su and shu. Okay, let's go through them together again. Sa, sha, si, shi, so, shu. Okay, now let's do the sin on its own and the sheen on its own. Sa, si, so, sha, shi, shu. Okay, so we've looked at how these letters sound. With sin and sheen, unlike with ra and zain, sin and sheen, depending on where we write them in a word, can be joined from the right or from the left. Okay, so after having looked at the fatha, kasra, and dhamma for each of these letters, we move on to looking at the fathatain, kasratain, and dhammatain. Okay, as is the norm in previous lessons, we'll go through each and every letter together, and we just need to remember as well that when it comes to these double intonations, there might be an additional letter at the end, which is normally an alif, to elongate the sound. Okay, so zan, ran, rin, zin. So there might be an extra letter when we're actually reading full words. Okay, but we don't have to worry about that. I just wanted to remind you. So let's look at them as we did before with the single intonations. So for the letter ra, it's ran. For the letter zain, it's zan with the fathatain. Now with the kasratain, it's rin, zin, and with the dhammatain, it is ron and zon. Okay, so let's do them again. Ran, zan, rin, zin, ron, zon. Okay, let's do each letter on its own so that we can actually get a grip of these sounds. Listen carefully. Ran, rin, ron, zan, zin, and zun. Okay, just another reminder. Ra is the R sound and zain is the Z sound. Now we move on to the next two letters. Okay, so after covering ra and zain for the double intonations, we're going to look at sin and sheen and how each letter sounds with a double intonation. Okay, so for sin with the fathatain, or the double fatha, the two fathas, it's san. For sheen, it's shan. Kasratain, sin, shin. And for the dammatain, sun and shun. Okay, let's look at them again. San, shan, sin, shin, sun, shun. Okay, if we look at them on their own, maybe it helps some of you a bit more. We've got san, sin, sun, and shan, shin, shun. Remember that with the double intonations, as I say in every lesson, there might be an addition of another letter, normally the elif, after the actual letter itself, to elongate the intonation, the double intonation. But not always, and I don't want you thinking about that just yet, because we don't want to get confused. One more thing about sin and sheen is that unlike ra and zain, they can be attached on this side and on this side. So I'll only be telling you about the ones that don't fit the norm, okay? The ones that can't be joined in a word from either side, so that you're aware of it. So for now we've got dal and dhal, and we've also got ra and zain. Okay, so we'll jump on to the tables of the summary tables that we do every lesson before we wrap today's lesson. Amazing. So we're at the summary stage. As we can see, we've got the 4 letters right down here, and we've got the different intonations, the fatha, the kasra, and the dhamma for each and every one of them. Okay, so let's go through all of them together at least twice before we move on to the fathatain, kasratain, and dhammatain, and then we'll draw this lesson to a close. So for ra, with the fatha, it's ra, with the kasra, ri, and with the dhamma, ro. For zain, with the fatha, za, with the kasra, zi, and with the dhamma, zo. For sin, it is sa, si, so. And for sheen, it is sha, shi, and sho. Let's do it one more time before we move on. We've got ra, ri, ro, za, zi, zo, sa, si, so, and sha, shi, sho. And now we go on to the fathatain, kasratain, and dhammatain. On we go with the double intonations, the dhammatain, kasratain, and fathatain, and the same as we did with the previous table, we'll go through all of these together twice. So for ra, with the fathatain, we've got ran, kasratain, rin, dhammatain, run. For the zain, zan is the sound with fathatain, zin with the kasratain, and zun with the dhammatain. For sin, we've got san, sin, and sun. And for sheen, we've got shan, shin, shun. Okay, so let's do them one more time together before we bring this to a wrap, because I want to try and keep these lessons as compact and as small as possible, so as not to overload you with information and then bore you from actually continuing and listening and learning the rest of the Arabic alphabet. Okay, so for ra, we've got run, rin, run. For zain, we've got zan, zin, zun. For sin, we've got san, sin, sun. And for sheen, we've got shan, shin, and shun. Amazing. This brings us to the end of lesson number 4, or episode number 4. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for jumping on and taking part. I look forward to finishing the whole Arabic alphabet and for us to celebrate together. New things are coming, better things are coming. Stay tuned, and I'll see you all very soon. Good night. Peace and love.